They say history is written by the victors, but what if entire chapters of human history were not just rewritten, but erased? Imagine a world where colossal beings once walked among men, towering figures whose footsteps shaped the earth, whose presence was so extraordinary that their existence became a forbidden story. For thousands of years, fragments of their memory have lingered in sacred texts, in ancient stone carvings, and in whispered myths passed down through generations. The Bible calls them the Nephilim, the giants born from the union of divine beings and mortal women. Scholars have dismissed them as symbols, theologians as metaphors, yet scattered across continents lie ruins that seem too large for human hands, and bones that do not fit within the boundaries of modern anthropology. What if the flood that swept across the world wasn't just divine punishment, but a desperate act to erase a race that was never meant to exist? What if behind the veil of myth lies a forgotten truth, a history of beings who defied the laws of heaven and reshaped the destiny of mankind? Today, we reopen the forbidden pages of ancient scripture and rediscover the traces buried beneath centuries of denial. From the deserts of the Middle East to the mountains of Peru, from the halls of the Vatican to the locked vaults of forgotten museums, the evidence whispers one name: the giants. This is not just a story about legends. It is a journey into the shadows of human memory, where faith, archaeology, and forbidden history collide. And once you begin to look, you may realize that the story of mankind is far bigger than we were ever allowed to believe. In every corner of the ancient world, across deserts, mountains, and forgotten seas, there were stories of beings far taller and stronger than men. They were said to have bones of stone, eyes like burning coals, and voices that rolled like thunder. These beings were not gods, yet they were not entirely human. They stood between heaven and earth, half divine and half mortal, born in an age when the world was still raw and the laws of creation were not yet settled. The oldest writings known to humanity speak of them. In the tablets of Sumer, they were called the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens. In the myths of Greece, they were the Titans, who once ruled before the age of man. In the cold sagas of the north, they were Jotun, the frost giants who battled the gods themselves, and in the sacred texts of the Hebrews, they were known as the Nephilim. The word Nephilim appears only briefly in the book of Genesis, yet within that single word lies one of the most haunting mysteries of the Bible. Genesis tells us that in the days before the great flood, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them as wives. From that forbidden union came a race of giants, the mighty men of old, men of renown. Scholars have debated for centuries what these words truly mean. Were the sons of God fallen angels, heavenly beings who defied the Creator? Or were they the descendants of an ancient divine line, kings who claimed celestial blood to justify their rule? If one reads the text carefully, the tone of the passage carries both awe and warning. The arrival of the Nephilim marked a turning point in the story of the world. It was a time when the boundaries between the spiritual and the physical were crossed, and what followed was chaos. Violence filled the earth, corruption spread among all living things, and soon, according to the scripture, God decided to wash the earth clean. Yet before the flood came, there was an age of wonder and fear. Ancient traditions describe the Nephilim as builders of cities, masters of hidden knowledge, and wielders of power unknown to mankind. Some were revered as heroes, others feared as tyrants. Their strength was unmatched, and their appetite insatiable. Legends tell of them consuming not only animals but men, devouring entire villages when the hunger took hold. They were said to reach the height of cedars, with hands large enough to crush stone. Archaeologists who have walked among the ruins of forgotten civilizations often find themselves confronted with monuments that seem too vast for human builders. Megalithic walls made of stones weighing hundreds of tons, lifted and placed with impossible precision. Pillars and gates that dwarf the scale of human architecture. The question has lingered for centuries. Who built these things, and for what purpose? Were they monuments to the gods, or memorials left behind by the giants themselves? The farther back one looks into prehistory, the more one encounters stories that mirror the biblical account. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, written long before Genesis, the hero Gilgamesh is described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, a man of colossal size and strength. He seeks eternal life, wanders among the gods, and witnesses the flood that destroyed his world. In many ways, Gilgamesh resembles a Nephilim, a remnant of an age when divine blood mingled with that of men. Across the ocean, in the myths of the Americas, there are tales of tall beings who came before the first tribes. The Hopi speak of the Palatquapi, the red-haired giants who lived in grand cities before being destroyed for their arrogance. In Peru, the Chachapoya, the cloud people, were described as light-skinned and towering in height. Even in the Pacific Islands, the oral traditions of the Maori and Easter Islanders recall builders of massive stone figures who were taller than any man alive today. Could all of these stories be mere coincidence? Or do they point to a shared memory, a distant echo of something real, something ancient that has been deliberately hidden beneath layers of myth and time? The story of the giants is not confined to scripture alone. Throughout history, explorers, missionaries, and scholars have reported discoveries of massive bones, skulls twice the size of a human head, and graves so large that they defy explanation. Newspapers from the 19th century tell of such finds unearthed in America, from the Ohio Valley to the deserts of Nevada. Many of these reports were quietly dismissed or later vanished from record. But the pattern remained. Wherever ancient mounds or forgotten burial sites were uncovered, there were whispers of giants. For the ancient writers, there was no question of their existence. To them, the giants were as real as mountains or rivers. They were the reason for fear, for awe, and for the laws set by the heavens. When Moses sent spies into Canaan, they returned trembling, saying, "We saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers." Such words were not metaphorical. They were testimony. The deeper one looks, the more one senses that the story of mankind is not as simple as we are taught. There was a time when something greater walked among us, something that defied both faith and reason. Whether they were fallen angels, hybrids of divine origin, or a forgotten species of human unlike ourselves, the legacy of the giants refuses to fade. It lingers in stone, in scripture, and in the collective memory of our kind. The world before the flood was a world of unimaginable scale, both in spirit and in form. It was an age of power and defiance, where heaven touched the earth and man reached for the forbidden. The giants were the bridge between those realms, and their downfall marked the beginning of ours. And yet, if their story ended there, the ruins of their age would not still speak. But they do. Their shadow stretches across continents and centuries, and the traces they left cannot be erased. Perhaps they were meant to serve as a warning, or perhaps as a reminder that humanity has never truly been alone on this earth. If the giants truly walked the earth, Their presence would have altered everything we know about the dawn of civilization. It would mean that the builders of the world's first monuments did not work alone, and that humanity's earliest teachers may have been something far greater than mortal men. When ancient priests gazed upon the stars and drew constellations that mirrored the heavens, they may have been following instructions left by beings who understood the cosmos in ways we can no longer imagine. Many cultures claim that their knowledge came from gods who descended from the sky. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, the watchers from the heavens who brought law and order to humanity. The Book of Enoch tells a darker version of that story. It says that 200 angels descended upon Mount Hermon and swore an oath to take human wives. They taught mankind the secrets of metal, enchantment, and war. From these unions came the Nephilim, whose hearts were set against both God and man. The world was not made to contain their hunger or their pride. Enoch writes that the cries of the earth reached heaven, that the violence of the giants had consumed creation itself. The angels who had remained loyal pleaded for justice, and so the Creator decreed that a flood would cleanse the world. But even in destruction, traces of the Nephilim endured. Some traditions say their spirits became the demons that still haunt mankind. Others say a few survived, hidden in the mountains, waiting for the waters to recede. When the flood ended and Noah's descendants spread across the earth, the old fear returned. In the land of Canaan, the Israelites encountered tribes described as giants. The Anakim and the Rephaim stood as living memories of that ancient race. Deuteronomy records that King Og of Bashan slept in a bed of iron 9 cubits long and 4 wide, a relic of the old world. Such measurements were not poetic exaggeration. They were records of something that seemed impossible, yet stood before the eyes of men. In later centuries, chroniclers from Greece, Rome, and the Middle East continued to write about giant bones found buried in the earth. Pliny the Elder described skeletons of enormous size uncovered in Crete and Sicily. Early Christian historians connected these discoveries to the descendants of the Nephilim. Even Islamic tradition preserves echoes of the same story. The Quran mentions a people of great stature, the Ad, who defied God and were swept away by a roaring wind. The tale changes from land to land, yet the core remains the same. Beings larger than life once existed, and their destruction was both divine and inevitable. The question that modern minds must face is simple. Were these tales nothing more than myth, or were they distorted memories of a forgotten epoch? Science demands evidence, and faith demands belief. Yet the ground beneath us keeps offering fragments that do not fit within either realm. Enormous stone tools unearthed in Africa, footprints in solid rock too large for any known species, and human-like skulls with dimensions far beyond the norm. Each discovery is quickly dismissed as anomaly or illusion, but the pattern persists. What drives a civilization to erase its past? If there was once a race of giants, their existence would challenge every structure of knowledge and power we hold today. It would mean that mankind was not the first master of this world. It would mean that divine intervention, or something like it, was a physical event rather than a metaphor. The flood, then, would not be only a story of judgment, but a record of biological and cosmic reset. For those who study forbidden archaeology, the signs are everywhere. In the towering walls of Baalbek in Lebanon, where stones weighing over 1,000 tons lie perfectly fitted together. In the mountain fortresses of Peru, where the blocks seem to have been molded like clay. In the myths of giants who built cities before the dawn of recorded history. Each of these sites tells a silent story, one that mirrors the words of Genesis and Enoch. To the ancients, these were not legends to entertain children. They were warnings, memories carved into stone to remind future generations of the consequences of pride. The giants were not merely large men. They were the embodiment of a world that reached beyond its limits, a world that sought to rival heaven. When that world fell, its ruins became our inheritance. Today, when we gaze upon the monuments of the past and marvel at their precision, we are looking through the eyes of people who once lived among beings of impossible power. Every myth of a god descending from the sky, every story of a hero born of divine blood, may be a fragment of the same lost history. The giants may have been the first to cross the forbidden threshold between earth and heaven, and humanity has been trying to follow ever since. The legend of the giants begins not in fantasy, but in memory. A memory that stretches from the dawn of civilization to the pages of Holy Scripture, from the stones beneath our feet to the stars above our heads. Whether we choose to see them as angels, titans, or simply ancestors forgotten by time, they remain part of us. Their shadow lies behind every story of creation and every fear of destruction. They are the mirror of what humanity could become when it reaches too far. In the next part of our journey, we will trace the footprints they left behind, following their trail through the flood, through the deserts of ancient Canaan, and into the depths of the earth where their bones may still rest. The story of the Nephilim is far from over, and the echoes of their world still call to those who dare to listen. Among all the mysteries written in the Bible, few have stirred as much awe and debate as the passage found in Genesis chapter 6. It begins in an age before the flood, when the world was still young and untouched by the weight of judgment. The verse is brief, almost hidden between genealogies, yet its meaning is vast. The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Within that simple line lies the birth of the Nephilim, the giants of old, the mighty men of renown. To many readers, this seems like a poetic fragment, a story of divine romance or moral decline. But for ancient scholars, those words revealed a terrifying truth. The sons of God were not men. They were heavenly beings, watchers of the earth, guardians of creation who abandoned their station and desired what was forbidden. The daughters of men were mortal women, innocent yet radiant, whose beauty tempted those who had once stood before the throne of heaven. When these two worlds collided, something unnatural came into being. The union of spirit and flesh produced children who were neither angel nor man. The Book of Enoch, an ancient text long excluded from the official canon, gives a detailed account of this fall. It names the leaders of the Watchers, 200 in total, who descended upon Mount Hermon and swore an oath together. They vowed that none would abandon the others, and that all would take wives from among humankind. Their leader was Semjaza, a being of immense wisdom and power, who feared that if he acted alone, he would bear the blame forever. So they bound themselves with a curse, knowing that their rebellion would bring doom. Once upon the earth, these watchers taught mankind the secrets of heaven. They revealed the ways of the stars and the movement of the planets. They showed men how to forge weapons, how to make mirrors of polished metal, how to use enchantments and potions. To the women they taught adornment, the art of painting the face, and the use of stones and herbs to alter beauty and desire. Knowledge once reserved for the divine became the property of mortals, and with it came corruption. The children born of these unions grew into giants whose hearts were set against heaven. They dominated the earth, devouring the labor of men and turning their strength to violence. The Book of Enoch says that their bodies reached great size, that they consumed all that men produced, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned upon mankind itself. They destroyed the earth and its creatures, and the cries of suffering rose to the heavens. It was then, according to the old texts, that the archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked upon the earth and saw the ruin. They pleaded with the Most High, saying that the world had become unrecognizable. In response, the Creator decreed judgment. The watchers would be bound in the depths of the earth until the day of final reckoning, and their monstrous offspring would destroy each other until none remained. The story is both majestic and tragic. It speaks of beings who sought to share their light but brought darkness instead. It tells of knowledge given too soon and of the price paid for crossing the boundaries between heaven and earth. To some, it is myth. To others, it is the hidden foundation of every ancient religion that speaks of gods mingling with mortals. What makes this account so compelling is how it mirrors other traditions from around the world. The Greeks told of the Olympians fathering heroes with human women. The Hindus spoke of Devas and Asuras descending to earth and taking mortal wives. Even in the ancient Americas, the stories of sky beings and star children echo the same pattern. It is as if all cultures remembered a single event, each through the lens of its own faith. The early Hebrew writers did not see the Nephilim as heroes. They were an abomination, a living reminder of disobedience and pride. The flood that came after was not just to cleanse the world of human wickedness, but to erase the traces of a creation that had violated the laws of heaven. Yet some believe the flood did not succeed completely. The Bible later mentions giants again, long after Noah's descendants repopulated the earth. How could that be if all had perished in the waters? The question suggests that some of the blood of the Nephilim may have survived. The notion that these beings could persist beyond divine judgment unsettled early theologians. It implied that the corruption was deeper than a single generation, that it had woven itself into the fabric of humanity. The giants of later scripture, the Anakim and the Rephaim, may have been echoes of that first sin, walking reminders that heaven's rebellion had left scars on the earth. To understand the true weight of this story, one must look at it not only as a tale of punishment, but as a reflection of the human condition. The watchers fell because they desired what was beautiful and mortal. They longed for connection, for love, for the warmth of human life that they could only observe from above. Their fall was born of longing as much as arrogance, and in that way they are not unlike us. Yet their gift of knowledge carried a curse. With every secret they taught, humanity gained power but lost innocence. The forging of weapons brought war. The art of adornment brought vanity. The study of the heavens became the root of forbidden magic. It was a bargain humanity did not understand, and one that still echoes in our restless pursuit of power today. The Book of Enoch describes the moment of judgment as a storm that shook both earth and sky. The giants fell upon one another. Their great strength turned to madness. The waters rose, and the voices of the watchers were silenced as they were cast into the depths. But their spirits, restless and unrepentant, remained to wander the world as disembodied forces. They became what later generations would call demons, whispering to mankind the same temptations that once led to their fall. The Nephilim were more than physical beings. They represented a fusion of realms that were never meant to unite. Their existence blurred the line between divine order and chaos. In destroying them, the Creator restored balance, but at a terrible cost. The world that emerged after the flood was smaller, quieter, and more fragile. The memory of the giants became a forbidden legend, carried in secret by priests and scribes who dared to remember. When the waters of the great flood receded, the world was reborn. The mountains stood clean and silent. The valleys were empty, and only the family of Noah and the creatures within the ark remained to breathe the new air of creation. For a time, peace returned. But memory is not easily erased. In the hearts of men, stories of the old world survived. Whispers of beings so tall that their heads brushed the clouds, so powerful that they shaped the destinies of nations. The Bible tells us that after the flood, as the descendants of Noah spread across the earth, they encountered the Anakim, the Rephaim, and the Emim, names that echo the shadow of the Nephilim. The Book of Numbers records the fearful words of the Israelite spies who entered the land of Canaan. They said, "We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Those words are not poetic exaggeration. They reflect genuine terror, the sense of standing before something ancient, something that should not have survived. How could this be if the flood had destroyed all life tainted by the Watchers? Ancient interpreters offered many explanations. Some believed that the wives of Noah's sons carried within them the blood of the Watchers, preserving a fragment of that forbidden lineage. Others suggested that fallen spirits, once released from their prison, repeated their sin with humankind, producing a second generation of giants. Whatever the truth, the evidence of their continued presence lies in the oldest traditions of the ancient Near East. In Canaanite myth, the Rephaim were known as spirits of the mighty dead, ancient kings who ruled before the flood. In Ugaritic texts, they were invoked in rituals of necromancy, as if their strength could still be called upon from beyond the grave. The Amorites, one of the great tribes that Israel would later face, were described in the book of Deuteronomy as a people great and tall, with cities that reached to the sky. King Og of Bashan, the last of the Rephaim, is said to have slept in an iron bed nearly 13 feet long. Whether symbolic or literal, the image reveals how deeply the idea of giants had taken root in the consciousness of the ancient world. The Hebrew prophets viewed these remnants as symbols of defiance against God's order. To them, the presence of giants in the Promised Land was a test of faith. The conquest of Canaan was not merely a military campaign. It was a spiritual war to purge the earth of a corruption that had survived the flood. Each victory over the Anakim, or the Rephaim, was seen as a reaffirmation that divine law still governed the world, and that chaos would not prevail. Outside the biblical texts, other civilizations preserved their own memories of giant beings who once walked among men. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, the divine kings who descended from the heavens and ruled before the flood. The Egyptians carved colossal statues and told of gods who measured in cubits rather than inches. Even the early Greeks told of the Titanomachy, the great war between the gods and the giants that shaped the earth itself. It is tempting to think that all these myths emerged independently, but their similarities suggest a shared memory, a fragment of truth that survived through different tongues and faiths. Some modern researchers have tried to trace this memory through archaeology. Across the Middle East and the Mediterranean, massive megalithic structures stand as silent witnesses to a forgotten age. Stones weighing hundreds of tons were placed with precision that defies explanation. The ruins of Baalbek in Lebanon, the walls of Jericho, and the terraces of ancient Bashan all hint at builders of extraordinary strength. The Bible names Bashan as the kingdom of the giants, the land of Og. It is here, some say, that traces of the Nephilim might still be found buried beneath the dust of millennia. As centuries passed, the legend of the giants transformed. To the Greeks, they became demigods and heroes. To the Hebrews, they remained abominations. To the early Christians, they were the ancient enemies of heaven. The Church Fathers debated their origin, wary of the Book of Enoch but unable to ignore its echoes. Some, like Tertullian and Lactantius, accepted that angels had once mingled with women. Others, like Augustine, rejected the idea, insisting that sons of God referred only to the righteous descendants of Seth. Yet even Augustine admitted that the old stories of giants could not be dismissed entirely. Archaeological discoveries in the 19th and 20th centuries rekindled this debate. Newspapers across America reported the unearthing of massive skeletons, some over 9 feet tall, found in burial mounds from the Midwest to the Mississippi Valley. Although most of these finds were later lost or dismissed as hoaxes, they fueled a growing fascination with the idea that giants had once lived on Earth. Many of those early reports described elongated skulls, double rows of teeth, and strange proportions that did not fit modern anatomy. Whether misunderstood fossils or genuine anomalies, they revived the question that the Bible had left unanswered. If the Nephilim truly existed, where are their remains? Could the bones of the mighty men of old still lie beneath our feet, hidden beneath layers of soil and disbelief? Or were they wiped clean from the earth, leaving only their memory etched in myth? The absence of proof does not erase the persistence of the story. In every culture, across every continent, the memory of giants endures, as though humanity itself cannot forget its encounter with the extraordinary. The flood may have washed away their bodies, but not their shadow. The names Anak, Rephaim, and Nephilim continue to echo through history like distant thunder. Each discovery of ancient ruins, each unexplainable artifact, each tale of beings too large for belief keeps the legend alive. Whether as cautionary myth or buried truth, the story of the Nephilim reminds us of a time when the boundaries between heaven and earth were thinner, and when humanity walked in the company of gods. The world after the flood was meant to be purified, yet traces of the old corruption lingered. The same longing that drove the watchers to fall, the desire for knowledge, power, and transcendence, remained in the hearts of men. Perhaps that is why the story of the giants continues to haunt us. It speaks not only of beings who once defied heaven, but of a defiance that still lives within our own nature. In the next part of this journey, we will explore how the echoes of the Nephilim may still be found in the stones and soil of our world. From the deserts of the Middle East to the mountains of South America, from forbidden texts to unearthed relics, the search for the giants has never truly ended. The question is not whether they existed, but whether we are ready to face what their story truly means. The story of the giants did not end with the pages of Scripture. Long after the flood and the fading of ancient memory, whispers of enormous bones began to surface in the soil of our world. Farmers, miners, and explorers across centuries would stumble upon skeletons that seemed too large, too strange, too old to belong to any known creature. These discoveries challenged the accepted history of humanity, hinting that the myths of the Nephilim might have roots in the ground beneath our feet. In the early days of modern archaeology, the world was a place of wonder and ambition. Adventurers dug into the sands of Egypt, the hills of Mesopotamia, and the burial mounds of the New World, seeking traces of lost civilizations. What they found often blurred the line between history and legend. Newspapers of the 19th century recorded dozens of discoveries that seemed to confirm the old stories of giants. In 1848, workers in Wisconsin uncovered a massive skeleton said to measure over 8 feet tall, with a skull larger than that of any man. In 1871, a similar find in New York described bones of a being nearly 10 feet in height. Reports like these appeared in respected journals and local gazettes, sparking both fascination and fear. At the time, the idea that giants once roamed the earth was not dismissed as fantasy. Many scholars saw it as a possible explanation for ancient myths and monumental architecture. The enormous stones of Baalbek, weighing hundreds of tons, seemed impossible for ordinary men to lift. The great monoliths of Stonehenge, the walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, and the Cyclopean fortresses of the Mediterranean all shared one mystery. How were they built, and by whom? Some suggested that ancient knowledge or technology had been lost. Others believed that the builders themselves were beings of extraordinary size and strength. As archaeology matured into a scientific discipline, the tone changed. Reports of giant skeletons began to disappear from academic publications, replaced by more cautious interpretations. Many early finds were labeled as misidentifications, exaggerations, or outright hoaxes. Some bones turned out to belong to prehistoric animals, others were never recovered. Yet the consistency of the accounts across continents and centuries left a lingering question. Could all of them be wrong? In America, the legend of the mound builders became central to this mystery. Across the Midwest, from Ohio to Illinois, thousands of earthen mounds dotted the landscape, built long before the arrival of European settlers. When early explorers excavated these sites, they often claimed to find skeletons of unusual size, sometimes with elongated skulls or double rows of teeth. These reports appeared in official documents such as the Smithsonian Institution's early field notes. But as the 20th century progressed, these records vanished from public discussion. The Smithsonian's silence became a story in itself, fueling theories that evidence of ancient giants had been deliberately hidden. Outside of America, discoveries of similar nature emerged. In the deserts of the Middle East, archaeologists uncovered tombs with sarcophagi, far larger than those of ordinary men. In Sardinia, legends of the giants' tombs were supported by megalithic structures and skeletons of unusual proportions. In the mountains of the Caucasus, miners unearthed what they described as humanoid bones, measuring over 9 feet in length. Each find stirred excitement, but each was quickly forgotten or dismissed. The same pattern repeated across cultures. In the Philippines, explorers spoke of ancient graves containing massive femurs. In South America, Jesuit missionaries recorded stories from indigenous tribes about the Old Tall Ones, beings who had lived before the Great Flood and whose bones still lay in the valleys of the Andes. Even in China, early chronicles mention the discovery of dragon bones, later identified by modern archaeologists as the remains of extinct animals, but the descriptions often matched the proportions of giants rather than beasts. To the skeptics, these tales were nothing more than folklore amplified by imagination, but to those who believed, the consistency of such stories across the world suggested something deeper. Could it be that remnants of a pre-flood civilization, one ruled by the giants, still lingered beneath the surface of our collective memory? The question of the giants touches on a larger mystery: the gaps in human history that conventional archaeology cannot easily explain. The precision of ancient architecture, the sudden rise of complex societies, and the myths of divine or semi-divine ancestors all point to a lost chapter of humanity's past. The Bible calls them the mighty men of old. The Greeks called them titans. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. Different names, same echo. In recent decades, a handful of researchers and independent explorers have returned to these forgotten accounts. They dig through archives, visit old dig sites, and examine photographs long ignored by mainstream science. Some claim to have found evidence of deliberate suppression: missing bones, destroyed specimens, reports rewritten to remove mention of size or anomaly. Whether through institutional bias or the simple discomfort of rewriting history, the story of the giants has remained buried. But the earth remembers. In layers of sediment and stone, traces of something extraordinary lie hidden. Fossilized footprints in the Paluxy River of Texas show impressions of human-like tracks alongside those of ancient dinosaurs, a discovery still debated today. If authentic, it would suggest that humans, or beings like them, walked the earth in a time far older than our textbooks allow. Across the world, in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, imprints of enormous feet have been found carved into rock, as though the earth itself once bore witness to a race of beings who stood far taller than men. The evidence may be fragmented, the interpretations controversial, yet the pattern remains. Where there are myths of gods and giants, there are also stones too large to move, structures too complex to explain, and stories too persistent to die. Among the most controversial names connected to the mystery of giants is the Smithsonian Institution. In the late 19th century, it played a central role in American archaeology. Government expeditions funded through the Bureau of Ethnology cataloged thousands of ancient sites, from the burial mounds of the Midwest to the river valleys of the Mississippi. Many of the earliest field reports described discoveries that would later vanish from official record. Newspaper archives still preserve their words. They spoke of skeletons measuring 8, 9, even 10 feet tall. They mentioned unusual skull shapes, sometimes elongated or possessing double rows of teeth. They described chambers lined with stone and filled with copper ornaments or artifacts of remarkable craftsmanship. Yet as archaeology became more standardized, those accounts grew fewer. Specimens that had been sent to the Smithsonian reportedly disappeared. Bones once on display were removed. Field notes were rewritten or lost. By the early 20th century, the institution denied ever possessing such remains. To skeptics, this was the natural correction of earlier exaggeration. To others, it was deliberate omission, the quiet sealing away of evidence that did not fit the accepted model of human history. Across the ocean, other anomalies surfaced. In the early 1900s, excavations in the Basque region of Spain unearthed skeletal remains measuring over 9 feet in length. In 1936, in the Euphrates Valley of Syria, a team working under British supervision discovered a series of tombs containing massive sarcophagi, each holding bones far larger than human. Local workers refused to continue the dig, calling the site cursed. The finds were transported to London but never exhibited, and no official report was released. The story faded, leaving only fragments in colonial archives and oral retellings by those who had been there. In the highlands of Peru, the mystery deepened. The ancient ruins of Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo are made of stones so immense and precisely fitted that even modern engineers struggle to explain their construction. Local legend speaks of the Viracochas, tall bearded beings who came from the sea and taught the people how to build. When Spanish chroniclers recorded these tales in the 16th century, they assumed the Viracochas were Europeans from an earlier time. But the Inca priests said they were gods, taller than any man, who had walked the Andes long before the sun first rose upon the empire. The Lovelock Cave in Nevada holds a similar legend among the Paiute people. They tell of a red-haired race of giants who lived in the region before the arrival of their ancestors. According to the tale, these giants were powerful but cruel, and the Paiute tribes united to destroy them, trapping the last survivors inside a cave and setting it aflame. In 1911, guano miners working in that same cave discovered mummified remains, weapons, and sandals far too large for a human foot. The finds were sent to museums in California and Nevada. A few artifacts remain on display, but the larger bones have vanished, catalogued as unidentified specimens. Skeptics argue that the remains were simply misidentified native mummies. Believers see in them proof that the legend was not just a story. Throughout the 20th century, explorers continued to search for traces of giants. Photographs emerged of enormous skulls, of femurs beside measuring sticks, of excavations showing bones the size of tree trunks. Most were dismissed as fabrications, often without proper investigation. Yet the persistence of these images and the speed with which they were suppressed kept the debate alive. Even today, stories circulate of private collections, remote tombs, and sealed archives containing remains that cannot be explained within the framework of conventional anthropology. Some researchers suggest a simpler answer. They argue that if the Nephilim truly existed, their bones would not resemble those of modern humans. Being part divine, part mortal, their structure might have decayed differently or been removed from human history through natural cataclysm. The flood itself, a global upheaval of unimaginable scale, would have destroyed or scattered nearly all traces. What remains could be buried deep beneath sediments or fossilized into forms indistinguishable from other species. In this light, the mystery is not that we have found so little, but that any trace remains at all. Still, the Earth occasionally reveals hints of something extraordinary. In the deserts of Saudi Arabia, photographs once circulated showing what appeared to be a gigantic skeleton exposed by wind erosion. The image was quickly labeled a hoax, yet it reignited public curiosity. Why are we so drawn to the idea of giants? Perhaps because it challenges the boundaries of our understanding. If beings of immense stature once walked among us, then human history is not what we think it is. The deeper question lies in what these beings represented. Were they a distinct species, an advanced race, or the remnants of the divine human hybrids described in Scripture? Ancient texts do not describe the Nephilim merely as large men. They were the mighty ones, the men of renown, beings whose wisdom and strength shaped civilizations. If even fragments of their existence survived, it would redefine our understanding of evolution, religion, and the origins of culture itself. The reluctance of mainstream science to address this possibility may not come from malice, but from fear. To acknowledge the giants would require rewriting every assumption about our past. It would blur the line between myth and fact, between faith and history. It would force us to admit that our ancestors might have known truths we have forgotten. As we move forward in this story, we step beyond bones and stones into the realm of symbols and memory. The next chapter explores how the legacy of the giants, whether real or imagined, shaped the myths, architecture, and religions of the ancient world. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the pyramids of Egypt and the towering idols of the Pacific, echoes of the Nephilim can still be felt in the monuments they may have inspired. Perhaps their bodies are gone, but their mark upon the earth endures, carved in stone and whispered through time. Across the continents, colossal stones rise from the earth as if placed there by hands that knew a different gravity. Some stand in perfect alignment with the stars. Others fit together so precisely that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. They bear no inscriptions explaining who built them or why, yet their presence alone speaks of power, precision, and a mastery of materials beyond what ancient tools should have allowed. To many, these monuments are the silent testimony of lost civilizations. To others, they are the fingerprints of the giants. In the heart of Lebanon lies Baalbek, once known as Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Its temple platform is composed of stones so vast that even modern cranes would struggle to move them. The Trilithon, a set of 3 megaliths each weighing nearly 1,000 tons, rests atop perfectly leveled foundations. Below them lie even larger blocks, the heaviest estimated at over 1,200 tons. Archaeologists say they were carved in nearby quarries, yet how they were transported and positioned remains unanswered. Local legends tell that Baalbek was first built by beings from the heavens, the very same who walked the earth in the days before the flood. To believers, these were the Nephilim, the mighty builders who left their mark in stone. Far across the ocean, high in the Andes, stand the ruins of Sacsayhuaman. Its walls are a jigsaw of stones so massive and irregular that they seem to have melted into one another. Each block fits perfectly, locking without mortar, defying the erosion of centuries. The largest weighs more than 300 tons and rests on foundations cut to match its shape with mathematical precision. The local Quechua legends tell of the Viracochas, tall, pale gods who possessed great strength and taught the ancient people the arts of construction. The Inca themselves said these walls were not their own creation, but the work of an older race whose knowledge had been lost. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza continues to challenge modern understanding. Built from more than 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, it aligns with the cardinal points and the constellation of Orion's belt. Some researchers note that the biblical text associates the sons of God with the watchers of the stars, and wonder whether this alignment is more than coincidence. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, divine beings who reigned in the age before the pharaohs. They were said to be giants, long-lived and wise, who descended from the sky and taught humanity how to build in harmony with the heavens. In the deserts of the Middle East, the ruins of Bashan whisper a different legend. The Bible calls Bashan the land of the giants, ruled by King Og, the last of the Rephaim. The basalt ruins found there, circular fortresses and massive stone dwellings, date back thousands of years, older than recorded history. One of the most mysterious is Rujum el-Hiri, a giant stone circle whose concentric rings and central tomb align with the summer solstice. Scholars debate its purpose, calling it a ceremonial site or an astronomical observatory, but local lore calls it the Bed of Og. The stones are said to have been placed by his own hand, each one a relic of his reign. Travel further north and the megalithic story continues. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe rises from the Anatolian plains, a temple complex that predates Stonehenge by millennia. The carvings on its pillars depict animals and symbols from a forgotten era, arranged with remarkable sophistication. The builders appear to have possessed knowledge far beyond that of the hunter-gatherers who supposedly lived at the time. Some researchers argue that Göbekli Tepe represents the work of survivors from a lost civilization destroyed by cataclysm. Perhaps even survivors of the flood who carried fragments of ancient wisdom with them. Others wonder if they were guided by beings who had once ruled the earth. The same echoes appear across Europe and Asia. The dolmens of France and Britain, the standing stones of Karnak, the passage tombs of Ireland, and the temples of Malta all share the same mysterious craftsmanship. Enormous stones arranged with astronomical precision, often aligned to the solstices or equinoxes, as if the builders were not only architects, but astronomers. How could so many distant cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, follow the same sacred geometry? The question suggests a common origin, or perhaps a shared teacher. Modern archaeologists attribute these feats to human ingenuity, the result of collective labor and simple tools used with patience and clever engineering. And yet, there are limits to what this explanation can comfortably hold. How were stones of hundreds of tons lifted without machinery? Why do many of these sites appear suddenly, fully formed, without evidence of gradual technological progression? Why do myths from every region describe tall beings who instructed men in the arts of architecture and astronomy? For those who look beyond coincidence, these monuments are more than relics of ancient ambition. They are messages in stone, reminders of an age when the boundaries between heaven and earth were thin. To believers, the same beings who fathered the Nephilim also taught humanity how to build according to cosmic order, embedding divine patterns into the earth itself. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, and the step temples of Central America all seem to follow the same principle, ascending structures reaching toward the sky, as if trying to reclaim a connection once lost. Perhaps the giants were not only beings of physical strength, but also keepers of knowledge. Their monuments may have served as beacons of memory, preserving sacred geometry and stellar alignment as a map to a forgotten world. The ancients said that those who walked with the gods built with stone because stone endures when flesh fails. It resists the flood, the fire, and the passage of time. Through it, they left a message for those who would come after. When we compare the great monuments of the ancient world, a strange harmony emerges. Though separated by oceans, the structures of Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Andes, and the Pacific all follow the same silent code. Their shapes echo mountains and stars, their alignments trace the movement of the sun and moon, and their proportions reflect a geometry that seems almost divine. It is as if the builders shared a memory of the heavens themselves. This pattern defies the narrative of isolated civilizations developing independently. Instead, it hints at a single guiding hand or a shared source of wisdom older than recorded time. In the Valley of Mexico, the pyramids of Teotihuacan rise with mathematical perfection. The Pyramid of the Sun mirrors the golden ratio, and the entire city is laid out according to celestial alignments. Ancient Aztec legends claim that it was built by giants in the age before the fifth sun, when the gods still walked among men. The name Teotihuacan means the place where men became gods. Its builders vanished long before the Aztecs arrived, leaving behind monuments too vast for their successors to claim. Across the ocean, the megalithic statues of Easter Island stand as silent guardians, their immense heads gazing toward the horizon. Beneath the ground, each figure continues with a full body carved from volcanic stone. The Rapa Nui people say the Moai were moved by mana, a supernatural force of the ancestors. But early European explorers recorded something else, stories of long-eared beings of great height who ruled the island before the current inhabitants. They were said to have been powerful and cruel, and their downfall came when the common people rose against them. In the plains of North America, the mounds of the ancient Mississippians form geometric patterns, visible only from the sky. Some resemble serpents winding across the landscape. Others depict birds or celestial symbols. The oral traditions of several tribes speak of great beings who lived before the flood, who could shape the land with their hands. The giants, they said, were punished for their pride and turned to stone beneath the hills. When European settlers later unearthed enormous bones in the mounds, newspapers of the 19th century reported them as the remains of those very giants. In the jungles of Cambodia, the temples of Angkor whisper of forgotten power. The massive stones of Angkor Wat and Bayon rise in precise symmetry, each tower representing a peak of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain of the gods. The carvings depict battles between humans and towering beings with elongated skulls and powerful limbs. Some archaeologists interpret these as mythic figures, while others quietly note their strange resemblance to depictions of the Nephilim or the Titans of the West. Even in Greece, the cradle of Western civilization, myths recall the age of giants. The Cyclopes, one-eyed beings of immense strength, were said to have built the ancient walls of Mycenae and Tiryns. Their stones, still visible today, are so large that later generations called them Cyclopean walls, believing only giants could have lifted them. The Greek poets told of an earlier race of men, the progeny of the gods, who fell from heaven after defying Zeus. The echoes of the Nephilim resound again, dressed in a different tongue, but carrying the same warning. When we weave these threads together, a global story emerges. The builders of the great monuments may not have been primitive humans learning by trial and error. They may have been guided or ruled by beings who carried the memory of a higher order. The same geometric ratios appear in the Great Pyramid, in the temples of the Maya, and in the stone circles of Europe. The same astronomical alignments point to Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades, as if all were oriented towards a celestial homeland. Modern scholars resist this idea, insisting on independent cultural development, yet they cannot explain why these patterns recur so perfectly across continents and epochs. The ancient texts, however, offer a simpler answer. Genesis tells us that the sons of God came down and taught mankind the secrets of heaven and earth. The Book of Enoch expands this, saying they revealed the course of the stars, the signs of the earth, and the ways of the metal and stone. What if these revelations were not metaphorical, but literal? What if the very foundations of civilization were built upon the knowledge of those forbidden teachers? In many traditions, architecture is sacred. To build a temple was to recreate the order of the cosmos on earth. The giants, whether divine or defiant, may have sought to preserve that order or to control it. Their monuments could have been tools of alignment, instruments through which the energy of the heavens was focused upon the world below. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, and the step temples of Mesoamerica all reflect the same ambition, to bridge the mortal and the divine. Some researchers argue that these constructions were more than ceremonial. They may have served as vast harmonic resonators, using sound and vibration to manipulate energy fields. Ancient chambers like those within the Great Pyramid or beneath the temples of Malta exhibit acoustic properties that amplify human voice and heartbeat alike. This discovery has led some to speculate that the builders understood a form of resonance technology lost to time. Such knowledge would have seemed like magic to early humanity, and perhaps it was precisely this that gave rise to the legends of gods and giants. If the giants built these monuments, their purpose may not have been mere worship, but remembrance. They may have sought to leave behind something that could not be erased by flood or fire, a message written in stone to those who would inherit the world after them. That message may be hidden in the geometry of the structures, in their astronomical orientation, or in the myths that surround them. The ancients did not write history in books, but in landscapes. Their temples and fortresses were chapters of a story too vast to fit upon parchment. As the ages passed and human empires rose upon the ruins of those monuments, the memory of the giants faded. Their works became attributed to kings and gods, their names replaced by those of pharaohs and emperors. Yet beneath every myth of divine construction lies the same whisper of something older. The stones themselves remember, and through them, the past continues to speak. Perhaps that is why humanity has always felt drawn to build higher, to raise towers that pierce the sky, to repeat the same pattern again and again. It is an echo of that ancient ambition, a shadow of the age when the sons of heaven walked among men and taught them how to shape the world in their image. The monuments of the giants are not merely ruins. They are reflections of a forgotten partnership between heaven and earth, between divine power and human will. In the next chapter, we will journey deeper into the evidence buried beneath these stones. We will follow the bones and artifacts that archaeologists have uncovered, some displayed, others quietly hidden from the public eye. The question will no longer be who built these structures, but what remains of those who built them. The stones tell one part of the story. The bones may tell the rest. If the giants once walked among men, then their traces should lie buried beneath our feet. Stones can outlast memory, but bones speak the truth of flesh and blood. Throughout history, whispers of enormous skeletons have surfaced from the dust of forgotten tombs, the banks of rivers, and the depths of caves. Yet each time such discoveries are made, they fade quickly into silence, as if the earth itself conspires to keep its secrets. In the early centuries of exploration, travelers and chroniclers often reported finding the remains of beings far larger than ordinary men. The Greek historian Pausanias wrote of giant bones displayed in temples, believed to be those of heroes from the age of the Titans. When the bones were tested by priests, they were said to radiate a divine aura. Roman writers told of skeletons unearthed in Sicily, some more than 10 cubits tall. These were claimed to be the remains of the Cyclopes, the builders of the ancient fortresses. To the people of that time, such discoveries confirmed what their myths had always said. Giants were not legends. They were ancestors. As the centuries turned and science replaced superstition, such claims began to draw skepticism. Yet the reports did not stop. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European explorers in the New World wrote of finding bones too large to belong to any known species. In 1577, a massive skeleton was discovered near Lucerne in Switzerland, its skull said to be the size of a man's chest. Local scholars examined it and declared it to be the remains of a giant who lived before the flood. Later, skeptics reclassified it as the bones of an extinct animal. But the witnesses insisted otherwise. In North America, during the expansion of the 19th century, a flood of similar discoveries was reported. Farmers, miners, and amateur archaeologists unearthed enormous human-like skeletons from burial mounds across the Midwest. Newspapers of the era carried headlines describing giant skulls with double rows of teeth, femurs longer than the leg of an average man, and sarcophagi carved from solid stone. In 1871, the Wisconsin Independent described the excavation of a mound containing several skeletons, each measuring over 7 feet tall. Other reports from Ohio, West Virginia, and Tennessee told of skeletons reaching 10 or even 12 feet in height. The Smithsonian Institution, the foremost scientific authority of the time, was said to have collected many of these remains. Yet, as the years passed, the bones disappeared from record. Letters and articles referencing the finds were quietly archived or dismissed. By the early 20th century, official archaeology had declared the stories to be hoaxes or misinterpretations. The burial mounds were reclassified as the work of ancient Native American cultures, and any mention of giants was erased from textbooks. Still, the old newspaper clippings remain, yellowed but stubborn, a testament to a time when the impossible seemed close enough to touch. Further south, in Ecuador and Peru, explorers uncovered bones of unusual proportions deep within the jungles. In 1964, Father Carlos Vaca, a missionary in the Loja region, discovered what he described as the bones of a race of giants. Some fragments were later displayed in a local museum and examined by researchers who noted their remarkable size. The story faded from mainstream science, but the artifacts continued to circulate among private collectors. Similar discoveries were reported in the Amazon basin and in the caves of Mexico, where enormous skulls with thick ridges and elongated craniums were found. Across the ocean, Asia held its own legends and evidence. In the 1930s, Chinese archaeologists in the Shandong province unearthed skeletons measuring up to 7 feet 6 inches tall, far above the average height of the population at that time. The site was dated to 5,000 years ago, corresponding to the age of the earliest dynasties. Ancient Chinese texts, such as the Shanhai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas, describe races of giant kings who ruled in the primordial ages, towering over ordinary men. Their reigns were said to have ended when heaven withdrew its favor. Africa, too, carries the echoes of these forgotten beings. The Dogon tribe of Mali tells of Nomo, amphibious deities who descended from the sky and were larger than any human. In South Africa, stone tools weighing hundreds of pounds have been discovered, tools too heavy for ordinary hands. Local oral histories claim they belonged to the first people, the mighty ones who walked with the gods. These accounts blend myth and archaeology until the line between them dissolves. Modern researchers often dismiss such tales as exaggerations or misidentifications of extinct animals. Mammoth bones, they say, or the remains of large primates could easily be mistaken for humans in an age without modern analysis. Yet even with today's technology, certain findings refuse to conform. Footprints embedded in solid rock, discovered in Turkey and Texas, appear unmistakably human, but measure over 20 inches in length. In 1988, workers in Nevada uncovered a fossilized handprint deep within a limestone layer dated to millions of years old. Its proportions were perfect, yet its scale was enormous. What unsettles the scientific community most is not the occasional anomaly, but the consistency of the pattern. From continent to continent, century after century, humanity keeps unearthing evidence that should not exist. Each time, the discovery is swiftly rationalized or forgotten. It is as if the story of the giants is a forbidden chapter of human history, one that institutions fear to open. The parallels to the ancient flood narrative are striking. Just as the Nephilim were erased by water, their memory seems constantly washed away by the tides of modern thought. For those who dare to look deeper, these bones are not curiosities, but witnesses. They suggest that the world before the flood was real, that the fusion between heaven and earth left physical traces. The Book of Enoch says that when the giants died, their spirits became the wandering souls that plague humanity, while their bodies turned to dust. But perhaps some of those bodies did not vanish entirely. Perhaps they remained entombed beneath the mountains, waiting to be found by hands willing to remember. The soil does not lie. It keeps every secret, patiently guarding the truth until someone asks the right question. Maybe that is why, even today, stories of giant skeletons continue to emerge from construction sites, mines, and quarries. Each new discovery reignites the ancient memory that once, long ago, this world was shared with beings who towered over men. The bones of the forgotten may yet have more to tell, if only we are willing to listen. If the earth still hides the bones of the giants, then perhaps the greater mystery lies not in their discovery, but in their disappearance. Each time evidence rises to the surface, it is swiftly buried again, not by nature, but by human hands. Official records vanish, artifacts are reclassified, and witnesses are silenced by skepticism. To some, this is coincidence, the natural course of science correcting error. To others, it is something far more deliberate, a quiet erasure of a truth that does not fit within the accepted order of history. One of the most persistent legends of this hidden history comes from the deserts of Nevada. In 1911, miners excavating bat guano in Lovelock Cave uncovered strange artifacts buried beneath layers of sediment. Among them were woven sandals over 15 inches long, oversized tools, and a cache of mummified remains said to belong to red-haired giants. The local Paiute tribe had spoken for generations of a race called the Siteka, fierce and towering beings who once ruled the region before being driven into the caves and burned alive. According to tribal legend, the giants were cannibals who preyed upon the smaller people until the gods intervened. Archaeologists who examined the site confirmed that something unusual had been found. Several large skulls were catalogued, along with artifacts far larger than those of any known indigenous culture. Early reports from the Nevada Historical Society described skeletons measuring up to 8 feet tall, but as the study progressed, the narrative changed. The remains were later described as belonging to tall individuals, and eventually, the mention of extraordinary size disappeared from the official record. Today, only fragments remain in museum collections, stripped of their context. Yet the legend endures among the Paiute, who insist that their ancestors' stories were true. Half a world away, another discovery shook the world of archaeology in the early 20th century. In 1928, in the Philippine Islands, miners uncovered a massive femur and skull fragments unlike any known species. Local scientists reported that the remains belonged to a giant human, but the bones were soon lost during transport to Manila. No photographs survive, only second-hand descriptions, and a few testimonies. The case was quietly forgotten, dismissed as myth by later scholars. In Afghanistan, among the desolate mountains and ancient ruins, whispers circulate of a far more recent encounter. American soldiers stationed near Kandahar in the early 2000s allegedly reported engaging a creature unlike anything they had seen. According to the story, the being was more than 12 feet tall, with fiery eyes and immense strength, wielding a spear that could pierce steel. The encounter ended in violence, and the creature was said to have been killed and taken away by helicopter. No official record of the incident exists, yet the tale spread through military circles and resurfaced years later in interviews with alleged witnesses. Whether real or fabricated, it speaks to the enduring fear that something ancient may still walk among us. Even within the scientific community, there are discoveries that defy explanation but never make it to public view. In 2012, a private research team in Ecuador's Amazon region unearthed skeletal fragments estimated to belong to a human nearly 8 feet tall. Photographs of the bones circulated online briefly before being removed. The museum that initially hosted them later claimed the artifacts were on loan and could not be verified. To this day, their location is unknown. Such cases form a pattern too consistent to ignore. Each discovery follows the same arc: revelation, excitement, controversy, disappearance. Skeptics argue that the human imagination is to blame, that people see giants where there are only coincidences of bone and shadow. Yet one must ask why these anomalies are handled with such secrecy. Why are they never allowed to stand long enough for open investigation? Why do institutions that exist to preserve knowledge seem so determined to erase certain parts of it? Some believe that the suppression is ideological, not scientific. If the giants of old were proven real, it would force a re-examination of the origins of humanity, religion, and evolution itself. The biblical story of the Nephilim would no longer be dismissed as myth, but as historical record. The notion that celestial beings once intermingled with humans would challenge the boundaries of both science and theology. Such a revelation could shake the foundation of the modern worldview, undermining the authority of institutions built upon the belief that man stands alone as the pinnacle of creation. The book of Genesis tells us that after the flood, there were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that. This phrase, often overlooked, suggests that the bloodline of the Nephilim endured beyond the cataclysm. Perhaps some of the skeletal remains unearthed in our time belong not to the first generation of giants, but to their descendants. Across ancient cultures, we find references to hybrid kings and demigods, Gilgamesh, Hercules, and the pharaohs, each described as part divine, part human, and of extraordinary size. Could these figures have been the remnants of a lineage that survived the flood and continued to shape early civilization? Archaeologists rarely speak of such connections, yet ancient texts are filled with them. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes its hero as 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a giant who built the walls of Uruk and sought immortality. The Bible speaks of the Rephaim, the Anakim, and the mighty men of old who were men of renown. The book of Numbers records how the spies of Israel trembled before the Anakim, saying, "We were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in theirs." To the Israelites, these were not spirits or myths. They were flesh and blood adversaries. Perhaps the greatest irony of all is that science, in its relentless pursuit of knowledge, has already uncovered hints of something extraordinary, but refuses to see it for what it might be. Geneticists have identified fragments of unknown DNA within the human genome, sequences that do not match any known species on Earth. Officially, these are labeled as genetic anomalies or remnants of extinct hominins. But to those who remember the ancient texts, they are the echoes of a forbidden union, a trace of the Nephilim that time could not erase. If such a lineage still lingers within humanity, then the bones we find are not relics of a separate race, but reminders of our own hybrid past. That possibility would mean that the giants never truly vanished. They were absorbed, diluted through generations, their blood hidden within ours. The myths of kings chosen by gods, of heroes of immense strength, of rulers claiming divine ancestry, might all stem from that same inheritance. The giants were not only before the flood. They are within the stories, within the ruins, and perhaps within us. In the end, every buried skeleton tells a story, and every missing record tells another. Together they form a silence more profound than words. The bones of the forgotten still call out from the dust, their message unchanged through millennia, that the world we know is only a fragment of what once was. In the next part, we will follow these echoes into the myths of the gods themselves, tracing how the memory of the Nephilim transformed into the pantheons of Olympus, Asgard, and beyond. The line between giant, god, and angel may be thinner than we dare to believe. When the floodwaters receded and the old world was washed away, humanity began again. The survivors carried with them fragments of memory, stories of a time when divine beings had ruled the earth and when giants had walked beside men. These memories, passed from tongue to tongue and shaped by centuries of retelling, became the myths of gods. The Nephilim, once condemned as abominations, were transformed into deities and heroes. The forbidden became sacred, and history became legend. The earliest civilizations to rise after the flood carried strikingly similar myths. In Sumer, the cradle of civilization, the people told of the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended from the heavens to establish order on earth. They taught humanity writing, agriculture, and kingship. The Sumerian king list, one of the oldest texts ever found, records that before the flood, kingship descended from heaven, and that some early rulers reigned for thousands of years. These were not mortal men. Their stature and wisdom marked them as beings apart, perhaps remnants of that first divine generation. The Akkadians and Babylonians inherited these tales and reshaped them into their own pantheon. Marduk, Enlil, and Enki were the great gods, but beneath their reign lay memories of older beings, the Igigi, who served the Anunnaki and rebelled against them. Some scholars see in this rebellion the echo of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, the same celestial beings who defied divine law by mingling with humankind. When the flood came, it did not only cleanse the earth of flesh, but also of memory. Yet fragments survived, hidden within stories of gods, kings, and heroes. In Egypt, the echoes grew louder. The ancient texts speak of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, who ruled before the first pharaohs. They were described as tall, luminous beings who came from the stars and lived for centuries. Their reign preceded the age of Mens, the unifier of Egypt, and their wisdom was said to have laid the foundation for the entire civilization. The Egyptians worshipped them as gods, but even the priests admitted that they were not eternal. They were born, they reigned, and they died. In the temples of Abydos and Edfu, inscriptions describe the Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods and giants walked together in harmony before the great flood reshaped the world. Far to the north, in the icy lands of Scandinavia, the Norse spoke of the Jotnar, the giants, who existed before the gods of Asgard. According to their creation myth, the first being was Ymir, a giant whose body became the earth itself. From his flesh came the soil, from his bones the mountains, and from his blood the seas. The gods Odin, Vili, and Ve were said to have descended from this ancient race, inheriting both its strength and its curse. Even in their divine halls, the gods feared the return of the giants, for they knew that one day the old blood would rise again, and the world would end in Ragnarok. In Greece, the Titans ruled before Zeus and the Olympians. They were beings of enormous stature and divine power, children of heaven and earth. Their rebellion against the higher order mirrored the defiance of the Watchers. When Zeus overthrew them, he cast them into Tartarus, a prison deep beneath the world. Yet even as prisoners, their legacy lived on. The sons of the Titans, like Prometheus and Atlas, became intermediaries between gods and men. The Greeks called them immortals, but their stories sound eerily like memories of beings who once crossed forbidden boundaries, who walked the earth in physical form. Across the ocean, the Maya and Aztec spoke of gods who descended from the sky and created humanity through a series of failed experiments. The Popol Vuh describes an earlier race of wooden men who were tall, strong, and soulless. The gods destroyed them with fire and flood because they lacked humility. In later ages, the same gods returned to teach the survivors how to build, how to count time, and how to read the stars. Statues of their deities depict figures with elongated skulls and towering proportions. The Olmec heads of Mesoamerica, carved with precision beyond their time, bear features that seem almost alien, almost otherworldly. It is as if every culture, separated by oceans and centuries, inherited the same ancestral story, that once there was a race of mighty beings who descended from the heavens, intermingled with humans, and ruled as gods and kings. Some were benevolent, others cruel, but all shared the same origin, the mingling of the divine with the mortal. The flood was meant to erase them, yet humanity rebuilt its civilizations in their image, raising temples and idols to their memory. The transformation from Nephilim to gods was not simply an act of myth-making. It was survival. The old stories were too dangerous to be told openly, too blasphemous for the new order that emerged after the cataclysm. So they were rewritten. The Watchers became the Anunnaki. The Rephaim became the heroes of Greece. The sons of heaven became the gods of Olympus and Egypt. Over generations, their rebellion became creation, their punishment became worship, and their forbidden knowledge became divine wisdom. The historian who dares to read across cultures will find the same pattern repeated like a shadow beneath the surface of every faith. The gods who bring fire to man, who teach him the secrets of the stars, who build cities and demand worship, are reflections of that lost generation. The story never truly ends. It only changes its name. In the next part of our journey, we will delve into how this divine inheritance shaped the bloodlines of ancient rulers. From the pharaohs who called themselves sons of Ra, to the demigods of Greece, and the kings who traced their lineage to the heavens, we will explore how the Nephilim legacy continued in human flesh. The giants may have vanished, but their blood still flowed through the veins of those who ruled the world. If the gods of the old world were born from the blood of the giants, then the rulers of humanity were their heirs. In every civilization, the throne was not simply a seat of power, but a sacred inheritance. Kings were chosen not for their strength alone, but because they carried within them a spark of divine blood, a fragment of the Nephilim legacy. The further back we trace the lineage of rulers, the closer we come to that forbidden union between heaven and earth. In Egypt, the pharaoh was not a man. He was a god in flesh. The living Horus, son of Ra, descended from the Shemsu-Hor, who ruled in the first time. The coronation of a pharaoh was not a political act, but a ritual of transformation. Through sacred words and symbols, the mortal body of the king was said to be infused with divine essence, reconnecting him with the bloodline of the ancient gods. The pyramids, aligned with the stars of Orion and Sirius, were not merely tombs, but conduits through which the pharaoh's soul could ascend to rejoin the celestial realm of his ancestors. The same idea appeared across the world. In Sumer, kingship was described as descending from heaven. Each ruler claimed descent from the gods of the sky, the Anunnaki, and the legitimacy of their rule depended on that divine link. In inscriptions carved upon stone, kings referred to themselves as mighty men, echoing the language of Genesis. They ruled by divine right because they were believed to carry within their veins the remnants of that ancient celestial blood. In Greece, the demigods stood between mortals and gods. Heracles, Perseus, and Theseus were said to be born of unions between gods and human women. Their strength was beyond that of men, their lifespans unnaturally long, and their deeds legendary. The Greek world celebrated them as heroes, but their origins were the same as the Nephilim, children of divine beings and human mothers. Their stories were warnings wrapped in glory, reminders of what happens when the two realms intermingle. Even in the Hebrew texts, echoes of this legacy persist. The Old Testament speaks of Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, nearly 10 feet tall. He was called a descendant of the Rephaim, a remnant of the giants who survived the flood. His defeat at the hands of David was more than a victory of courage over might. It was symbolic of the final triumph of human destiny over the lingering shadow of the Nephilim bloodline. Yet Scripture also hints that the bloodline did not die with Goliath. The phrase, "and also after that," in Genesis, lingers as a quiet admission that the giants continued to exist in hidden corners of the earth. In ancient Mesopotamia, rulers like Gilgamesh claimed divine ancestry. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes him as 2/3 god and 1/3 man. He was a giant among men, a builder of walls and seeker of immortality. The gods loved him and cursed him in equal measure, for he embodied their rebellion. He was the living proof that divine blood could exist within human flesh. His story, though framed as myth, carries within it the genetic memory of the Nephilim heritage. The same pattern reemerges in the East. In India, the Mahabharata and Ramayana tell of heroes and kings with extraordinary size, power, and longevity. Bhima, Arjuna, and Ravana were described as towering beings capable of wielding weapons that could scorch the earth. The gods who sired them were often sky deities, descended from celestial realms. Their wars were not simple human conflicts, but cosmic struggles between those who bore divine blood and those who did not. The Vedic texts speak of beings called the Devas and Asuras, locked in eternal conflict, both claiming descent from a higher source. Their physical descriptions, towering, radiant, and terrifying, mirror those of the giants of the West. Among the Celts, the Tuatha De Danann were said to be a race of godlike beings who descended from the sky and ruled Ireland before the coming of men. They possessed great knowledge of magic, metallurgy, and warfare. When defeated, they retreated underground, becoming the fair folk of later legend. Their king, Dagda, was described as enormous in stature, and his sons carried the same divine might. The Celts remembered them not as spirits, but as an older race, displaced by the march of human history. Even the Bible's genealogies seem to whisper of this ancient lineage. The Book of Enoch describes how the Watchers who fathered the Nephilim taught their children the secrets of heaven, metallurgy, enchantment, and war. When the flood came, their bodies perished, but their spirits endured, influencing humanity from the shadows. Some traditions claim that fragments of their blood survived through Noah's family, ensuring that the divine essence was never fully extinguished. This belief would later evolve into the concept of the divine right of kings, the idea that rulers govern not by human consent, but by celestial inheritance. Throughout history, royal houses have guarded their bloodlines with near religious fervor. Dynasties intermarried, claiming descent from the gods. In Egypt, the pharaohs wed their sisters to preserve purity of divine essence. In Mesopotamia, sacred marriage rites between the king and the priestess symbolized the union of heaven and earth. In medieval Europe, kings claimed lineage from the House of David, or from figures like Alexander the Great, and even Noah himself. Each claim, beneath its politics, carried an echo of the ancient belief that rulership was born from a mingling of mortal and divine. Symbols of divine authority reinforced this connection. The crown represented the halo of light once belonging to celestial beings. The scepter symbolized the staff of the Watchers, bearers of heavenly knowledge. The throne itself was seen as a portal between the world of men and the realm of gods. Across cultures, rulers bore titles that meant Son of Heaven, Descendant of the Stars, or Chosen by the Gods. These were not metaphors to the ancients. They were declarations of heritage. But such power came at a price. The divine blood carried both blessing and curse. It granted wisdom, strength, and charisma, but it also carried pride, ambition, and rebellion, the very traits that led to the downfall of the Watchers. History is filled with rulers who sought to transcend mortality, to build monuments that would outlast time, to defy the will of heaven. From Nimrod's tower to the pyramids of Giza, from the ziggurats of Babylon to the temples of the Maya, the same desire burns through the ages, the longing to reclaim what was lost, to ascend once more to the realm of the gods. Perhaps this is the true legacy of the giants, not their size or strength, but their defiance. Within the human heart lingers that ancient spark of divinity, restless and unsatisfied. The descendants of the Nephilim may no longer stand 10 feet tall, but their ambition towers still. The empires they built, the wars they waged, the faiths they founded, all may be echoes of that eternal hunger for the forbidden. In the next part, we will follow this bloodline into the hidden chambers of secret societies, royal orders, and ancient brotherhoods that claim to guard the remnants of divine knowledge. From the Knights Templar to the Freemasons, from the alchemists of the Renaissance to the modern elite, the question remains: has the blood of the gods truly vanished, or has it merely gone underground, waiting for the age of its return? As the world grew older and civilizations multiplied, the memory of the giants faded from open history. The names of the Nephilim, once whispered in awe and terror, became forbidden. The rulers who claimed divine descent learned to hide their heritage beneath symbols and ritual. What had once been spoken as truth became concealed within mystery schools, secret orders, and sacred brotherhoods. The blood of the gods did not vanish, it went underground. The ancient world was not ignorant of this concealment. The priests of Egypt, the magi of Persia, and the sages of Chaldea all guarded fragments of knowledge that traced back to the first time. Their temples were more than places of worship. They were repositories of memory, coded with geometry, mathematics, and celestial alignments that mirrored the heavens. Every obelisk, every pyramid, every ziggurat was a reminder of the ancient bond between earth and sky, a map for those who remembered how to read it. The secret they preserved was not merely architectural genius, but the story of origins, the story of the beings who once ruled before the flood. As empires fell and faiths rose to replace them, the old knowledge was hunted. Yet each time it was suppressed, it resurfaced under a new name. When Babylon collapsed, its priests carried the hidden teachings westward. In Greece, they became the philosophers of the mystery schools, Pythagoras, Plato, and others who spoke of divine forms and immortal souls. In Rome, the cults of Mithras and Isis concealed ancient cosmologies behind ritual and symbolism. The outer world worshipped gods. The inner circle preserved the memory of beings older than gods. With the rise of Christianity, the Church became the gatekeeper of truth. Yet even within its sanctuaries, echoes of the forbidden past persisted. The early Church Fathers debated the nature of the Nephilim, some calling them fallen angels, others demonic hybrids. The Book of Enoch, once revered, was later banned from the biblical canon, its teachings buried beneath centuries of silence. But those who sought knowledge in secret continued to read it. Monks copied it in hidden monasteries. Scholars discussed its meaning in hushed tones. The Watchers and their offspring had not been forgotten. They had simply been reclassified as myth, their reality too dangerous for the new order. During the Middle Ages, the torch of hidden knowledge passed to the secret orders of Europe. The Knights Templar, officially guardians of the Holy Land, were rumored to have discovered ancient relics beneath the Temple Mount. Some accounts claim they unearthed scrolls that traced the lineage of kings back to the sons of the Watchers, revealing a bloodline that connected the rulers of Europe to the divine beings of old. When the Templars were suppressed, their secrets did not die. They dispersed across the continent, taking with them symbols that would later appear in the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and the alchemists of the Renaissance. These groups spoke a language of geometry, light, and transformation. Their emblems, the all-seeing eye, the compass and square, the blazing star, were not inventions of their time. They were continuations of symbols used in ancient temples to represent divine order and celestial descent. The initiate who entered these brotherhoods was taught not only the mysteries of the material world, but also the hidden lineage of mankind. Humanity, they whispered, was not the child of dust alone. It bore within it the remnants of something celestial, something that once stood beside the gods. The Renaissance brought a brief flicker of openness. Scholars like John Dee, Giordano Bruno, and Paracelsus sought to reunite science and spirituality. They believed that the universe was a grand design, and that humanity's task was to recover the wisdom of the ancients. Bruno spoke of infinite worlds and beings who inhabited them, ideas that echo the ancient Watchers who descended from the heavens. Dee, counselor to Queen Elizabeth I, filled his journals with angelic languages and coded visions. He believed that by communicating with the higher realms, mankind could reclaim the lost knowledge of the first civilization, the knowledge of the Nephilim. But each awakening met with suppression. Bruno was burned at the stake. Dee's works were branded heresy. The alchemists who sought the philosopher's stone, symbol of divine transformation, were hunted as sorcerers. Yet beneath the flames and fear, their ideas endured. Alchemy itself can be read as a metaphor for the human condition, the attempt to purify the mortal and restore the divine spark, to transmute base matter into light. To those who understood, it was not gold they sought, but the rebirth of the divine within man. In the shadows of power, bloodlines continued to intertwine. The royal families of Europe intermarried obsessively, not only for politics, but to preserve something unseen. Genealogies trace certain noble houses back to the Merovingians of France, who claimed descent from a being called the Fisher King, a title echoing the mythic guardian of forbidden wisdom. Some traditions link this line to the union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, yet beneath that Christian veneer lies an older story, one that reaches back to the mingling of gods and men. Whether the myth is literal or symbolic, it reflects the enduring obsession with divine ancestry. Even in modern times, the symbols remain. The Great Seal of the United States bears the all-seeing eye above an unfinished pyramid, surrounded by Latin words meaning, "He approves the new order of the ages." To some, it is a declaration of enlightenment. To others, a quiet acknowledgement that the ancient order never truly ended, it merely changed its face. The architects of the modern world, from scientists to secret societies, may have inherited more than they realized from the ancient priesthoods. The persistence of these symbols, ideas, and bloodlines suggests continuity across millennia. A thread runs through time, binding the builders of ziggurats to the architects of cathedrals, the priests of Babylon to the scholars of the Renaissance, the watchers of Enoch to the visionaries of the modern age. Always, the same promise whispers beneath the surface, that the lost wisdom of the gods can be regained, and that those who hold it will rise above the rest of humanity. If the Nephilim were truly the bridge between heaven and earth, then their legacy is not just biological, but ideological. It is the belief that some are born to rule, to shape destiny, to stand closer to the divine. This idea has justified empires, crusades, and revolutions. It has inspired both enlightenment and tyranny. And behind it all, hidden in the folds of history, the secret keepers have preserved the memory of the first union, waiting for the time when it might return. In the next part, we will step deeper into the modern age, where ancient bloodlines intertwine with secret orders and global power. We will explore how myths of divine descent evolved into real-world hierarchies, how the same symbols of light and knowledge continue to guide those who claim to rule in the name of progress, and how the shadow of the giants still looms behind the thrones of men. By the dawn of the modern age, the old kingdoms had begun to crumble, yet their bloodlines endured beneath the surface of revolution and reform. Thrones fell, empires rose, and new nations declared themselves free, but the same invisible thread continued to weave its way through history. The symbols of divine rule had changed shape, yet their meaning remained. The crown became the seal, the scepter became the pen, and the divine right of kings transformed into the quiet authority of those who claimed to shape the destiny of nations. The families that once traced their lineage to the gods now found new ways to preserve their influence. The dynasties of Europe intermarried until they formed a single web of relation, connecting the houses of Britain, France, Germany, and Russia. Historians often speak of politics and alliance, but the genealogies reveal something more ancient, a deliberate preservation of lineage. Even as democracy took root, power remained hereditary, disguised in the form of wealth and institutional control. The myth of divine blood was not discarded. It simply went underground, reinterpreted for an age of reason. In the 17th and 18th centuries, secret societies flourished once again, carrying forward the language of the ancient mystery schools. The Rosicrucians spoke of a hidden wisdom inherited from Egypt and Chaldea. The Freemasons adopted the geometry of the builders of old, their temples echoing the design of the ziggurat and the pyramid. Within their initiation rites, symbols of the all-seeing eye and the blazing star appeared, tracing a lineage of light back to the first watchers. To the uninitiated, these were emblems of enlightenment. To those within, they represented something older, the remembrance of the beings who first taught mankind the secrets of heaven and earth. The Enlightenment era brought new interpretations of ancient truths. Science rose to prominence, but many of its pioneers were steeped in esoteric tradition. Isaac Newton, known for the laws of gravity, spent more of his life studying alchemy and prophecy than physics. He believed that hidden within Scripture lay the key to understanding the architecture of creation itself. To him, as to the ancients, knowledge was divine. The pursuit of it was not rebellion, but restoration, a way to reclaim the wisdom of the lost world. Yet the same light that illuminated minds also cast long shadows. As the industrial age transformed the world, the gap between rulers and ruled widened once more. Secret brotherhoods evolved into political and financial networks, their symbols etched into the architecture of capital cities and the insignias of global institutions. The pyramid crowned by the radiant eye appeared not only on Masonic lodges, but on currency, government seals, and monuments. To some, it was a sign of unity and order. To others, it was a quiet declaration that the ancient line still held dominion. The 19th century witnessed the rise of what could be called the new priesthood of power. The bankers, industrialists, and visionaries who shaped nations with wealth instead of armies. Some traced their ancestry to noble bloodlines, others claimed descent from more mysterious origins. Genealogists have noted that many of the most influential families in modern finance and politics share distant ties to European royalty. Whether coincidence or design, the pattern mirrors the ancient union of divine and human authority. The gods had become invisible, but their children still ruled. Wars came and went, yet with each upheaval, the same structures re-emerged. In the aftermath of global conflict, new orders arose promising peace and progress, their foundations laid upon symbols that echoed ancient geometry. The United Nations headquarters was designed with proportions resembling the sacred ratios of Egyptian temples. The great obelisks of Washington and Paris stand as modern echoes of the pillars of Heliopolis. Even in architecture, the memory of the first civilizations lingers like a fingerprint of forgotten gods. Meanwhile, the search for forbidden knowledge continued in the shadows of science. Archaeologists unearthed megalithic structures that defied explanation. Geneticists discovered anomalies in human DNA, fragments that seemed to belong to no known species. The official stance was caution, but among certain circles, whispers began anew. Were these traces the final evidence of the Nephilim's legacy, buried within humanity itself? Could it be that the ancient bloodline had not vanished, but had become the foundation of modern civilization, its influence hidden in plain sight? During the 20th century, a new mythology arose, the myth of control through knowledge. Secret programs pursued ancient power under the guise of scientific research. Expeditions to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Tibet were funded by governments and private patrons alike, each seeking remnants of lost wisdom. Symbols once carved into stone were now embedded into the emblems of secret agencies, corporations, and international councils. Those who understood their meaning saw not coincidence, but continuity. As the world entered the digital age, the ancient symbols found new homes in technology and culture. The same all-seeing eye that once represented divine watchfulness now peers from behind screens, satellites, and surveillance networks. The dream of omniscience, once reserved for gods, has become a human ambition. The ancient warning of the Watchers, that knowledge unrestrained leads to corruption, echoes in the corridors of modern power. Humanity has inherited the tools of the divine, but not always the wisdom to wield them. And yet, beneath the surface, there are those who still believe they serve a higher order. Within certain esoteric circles, whispers persist of a covenant that predates all religions, a pact to safeguard the remnants of divine blood until the appointed time. Some claim that the prophecy speaks of a return, a restoration of the union between heaven and earth. The term New World Order, so often dismissed as political rhetoric, may in truth echo something much older, a new manifestation of an ancient dominion, when those who bear the spark of the old gods will once again reveal themselves. Whether myth or design, the pattern of history suggests intent. Each age hides its architects. Each empire carries the mark of those who came before. The same symbols that adorned temples of the gods now crown the emblems of modern power. The same language of light, geometry, and ascension runs through religion, science, and art. Humanity has not escaped the legacy of the giants. It has become the vessel of it. If the Nephilim sought to bridge heaven and earth, then the modern world may be their ultimate creation, a civilization that looks upward with technology instead of prayer, that builds towers of glass and steel instead of stone, and that dares once again to challenge the heavens. The dream of Babel lives on, and with it the ancient question, will mankind rise to the divine, or will it repeat the fall of the Watchers? In the next part, we will explore how this enduring myth has shaped not only history, but the human psyche itself. From religion to revolution, from art to ideology, the shadow of the giants continues to guide the story of mankind. We will ask whether the legend of the Nephilim is not just a tale of the past, but a mirror held up to our own ambition, our longing to transcend, and our struggle with the divine within us. For centuries, mankind has searched outward for the remnants of the giants, stones too vast to move, bones too large to belong to men, cities that seem built for beings of impossible strength. Yet perhaps the true legacy of the Nephilim is not buried beneath the earth, but within the human heart. The ancients spoke not only of the giants' physical might, but of their insatiable hunger for knowledge, power, and immortality. In that desire, they were mirrors of humanity itself. When the Watchers descended, they offered forbidden wisdom. To them it was a gift, a sharing of divine insight with their creation. To the Creator, it was transgression, a disruption of balance. Yet to humanity, it was the spark that ignited civilization. The paradox is as old as thought itself. Knowledge both elevates and corrupts. From this paradox, the human soul was shaped, half divine, half mortal, yearning for light, yet chained to shadow. In every age, humans have reenacted this cosmic drama. The myth of the fall, of reaching too far, repeats in countless forms. Prometheus stole fire, Adam ate the fruit, the builders of Babel reached toward heaven. Each story carries the same echo, the forbidden ascent, the price of illumination. Whether in religion, art, or science, humanity has always stood at the threshold between obedience and ambition. That tension defines us. It is said that the Nephilim were giants in stature, but perhaps their true enormity was of spirit. They embodied the boundless potential of creation, unrestrained by humility. Their strength, their intellect, and their defiance reflected the extremes of what humanity could become. When they fell, they left behind not only ruins, but an imprint, a resonance that lingers in every generation. In our myths, our dreams, and our ambitions, we continue their story. Ancient texts describe how the earth cried out under the weight of the Nephilim. Their violence consumed the world, yet their brilliance transformed it. They built cities, forged weapons, and taught the arts of writing, music, and astronomy. They became the architects of civilization and its destroyers. The flood that followed was not only divine punishment, but cosmic reset, a second creation meant to restore balance. But some believe their essence survived, not in bloodlines or bones, but in the human soul's thirst for transcendence. Across cultures, the same archetype appears, the hero born of divine and mortal union. Hercules, Gilgamesh, Samson all share traits of the Nephilim. They are strong, defiant, torn between worlds. They fight monsters, yet often become monsters themselves. The duality of their nature is the duality of mankind. Every civilization creates its demigods, then fears their power. The cycle continues, suggesting that the legend of the Nephilim is not just history, but psychology, an eternal reflection of what it means to be human. In modern terms, the myth translates into the pursuit of mastery over nature. The laboratory has replaced the temple, and the scientist stands where the priest once did. Through technology, humanity now performs the miracles once attributed to gods, healing disease, creating life, altering the fabric of reality. The ancient promise of the Watchers has been fulfilled through human hands. Yet with each new discovery, the same question arises: are we ascending toward divinity, or repeating the fall? The myth warns that power without wisdom leads to ruin, yet history shows that humanity learns slowly. The giants of old fell because their strength outgrew their conscience. Today's giants are corporations, governments, and technologies that shape the destiny of billions. They, too, rise from human ambition. They, too, risk forgetting the balance between creation and destruction. The story of the Nephilim is retold every day in laboratories, boardrooms, and battlefields. But the legend also carries hope. If the Nephilim embodied the corruption of divine potential, then humanity's struggle to overcome that legacy is the path toward redemption. Ancient mystics believed that the divine spark within mankind was not extinguished by the fall, but hidden, waiting to be awakened through understanding. The Gnostics spoke of gnosis, the inner knowledge that reconnects the soul to its source. The Kabbalists called it the restoration of the shattered vessels. In all traditions, the goal is the same: to reclaim the harmony that once existed between heaven and earth, between knowledge and humility. Perhaps the true reason the legend endures is that it speaks to the deepest human longing: to transcend limitation, to reunite with the divine, to become more than flesh. The giants were punished for overstepping that boundary, yet their ambition lives on within us. We build towers of steel and circuits instead of stone. We seek immortality through data and medicine instead of myth. The tools have changed, but the dream is the same. The Nephilim were not simply beings of the past. They were the first to dream as humans now dream, to be gods of their own making. As we explore this idea further, we begin to see that the boundary between history and myth dissolves. The story of the giants becomes the story of humanity's evolution. Our rise from ignorance, our fall into hubris, our endless climb toward the unknown. In that sense, the Nephilim were not a mistake of creation, but a mirror held before it. They showed what happens when power is pursued without wisdom, and what is lost when knowledge is severed from spirit. The ancients feared them because they were too close to the divine. The modern world denies them because it fears the truth of what they represent. But in every legend, in every whisper of the old world, they remain. A reminder that within humanity lies both the creator and the destroyer, the angel and the beast. The echo of the Nephilim is the echo of ourselves. If the Nephilim once walked the earth as beings of immense power and pride, then their truest legacy may be the spiritual echo that calls humanity to awaken. The myths tell us that they were cast down for their arrogance, yet they also reveal a hidden truth. Within their fall lies the seed of redemption. What fell from heaven did not vanish. It became embedded in the human soul as potential. Each generation inherits the same choice: to rise through understanding or fall through desire. Throughout history, the pursuit of that divine spark has shaped philosophies and faiths alike. The ancient mystery schools taught that man was both the child of earth and the child of stars, that within each person slept a fragment of celestial fire. To awaken, it required discipline, compassion, and wisdom, the qualities the giants lacked. Their fall was not inevitable. It was a consequence of imbalance, of knowledge untempered by humility. Thus, humanity's journey becomes the continuation of their lesson. The task of man is to reconcile what the Nephilim could not. Religions across the world echo this theme. In Christianity, the path of salvation is not the rejection of knowledge, but the restoration of harmony between divine will and human freedom. In Buddhism, enlightenment arises when desire is transcended, not when power is seized. In the mystical traditions of the East and West, the same truth resounds. The divine dwells within, but it must be awakened through love, not domination. The giants reached outward to claim heaven by force. Humanity must reach inward to rediscover it through grace. This inward ascent is symbolized in countless ways. The alchemists called it the great work, the transmutation of the base into the pure, the lead of ignorance into the gold of wisdom. The Kabbalists saw it as the ascent of the soul through the Sephirot, returning to unity with the divine source. The yogis of India spoke of awakening the serpent power that lies coiled at the base of the spine, rising through the chakras toward illumination. All are different languages for the same truth. The true mountain to be climbed is within. In this sense, the story of the Nephilim is not one of damnation, but of unfinished evolution. The giants were beings who tried to merge heaven and earth through strength alone. Humanity is invited to achieve the same union through consciousness. The flood may have cleansed the world of their bodies, but not of their essence. That essence has become the restless spirit of innovation, the hunger for transcendence, the eternal dissatisfaction that drives humanity forward. When balanced by wisdom, it becomes creativity and progress. When corrupted, it becomes tyranny and destruction. The line between the two is as thin as breath. History shows that every age of enlightenment is followed by an age of excess. The rediscovery of knowledge often births both beauty and ruin. The Renaissance gave the world art, science, and empire. The atomic age gave energy and annihilation. These are not coincidences, but reflections of the dual inheritance within mankind. We are, as the ancients said, made in the image of gods, yet formed from dust. The Nephilim remind us what happens when the divine spark forgets its vessel. Modern psychology, though far removed from theology, echoes these same truths in different words. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains both our darkness and our potential. To deny it is to remain divided. To integrate it is to become whole. In mythic terms, confronting the inner giant is the act of reclaiming one's full self. The Nephilim were externalized projections of that inner power. When humanity fears its own greatness, it casts it outward as a monster. When it accepts it, the monster becomes the guardian of transformation. Thus, the legend of the giants becomes a map for inner awakening. Each person carries within them a fragment of that ancient fire. It manifests as curiosity, ambition, the will to create, the courage to challenge the unknown. But it also carries the temptation to dominate, to control, to become the god, rather than to commune with the divine. The balance between these impulses determines whether one becomes a creator or a destroyer. In this struggle, the human soul replays the cosmic story of the Nephilim with every choice it makes. In the silence of reflection, when the noise of the world fades, one can still sense that echo, the call to rise, to remember, to become. It is both invitation and warning. The path of awakening is not without peril, for to face the divine within is to confront one's own capacity for both light and shadow. Yet it is also the path that fulfills the forgotten covenant, the reconciliation of heaven and earth within the human heart. In this, the fall of the giants becomes the beginning of our ascent. Perhaps this is why their story refuses to die. The Nephilim remain alive not in stone or scripture, but in the imagination of every seeker who looks beyond the veil of the visible. They remind us that power is sacred only when guided by wisdom, that creation and destruction are two hands of the same being. They remind us that within every human lies a sleeping giant, waiting not to conquer the world, but to awaken the soul. As we move forward into the next chapter, the question deepens. If the Nephilim are no longer beings of flesh, but forces within consciousness, what happens when humanity collectively awakens that power once more? What will it mean when technology, spirituality, and desire converge in a single act of creation? Will the ancient union be restored? Or will history repeat itself under a new sky? In the quiet corners of the modern world, far from the noise of politics and progress, whispers have begun to rise again. They speak of ancient powers stirring, of patterns repeating, of a cycle that has reached its turning point. To many, these are merely superstitions, echoes of myths long forgotten. Yet to others, the signs are undeniable. Across continents and disciplines, fragments of truth seem to converge, suggesting that the Watchers, the divine beings who once descended to the earth, may not be lost to time after all. In recent decades, archaeologists have uncovered sites that defy conventional explanation. Massive structures buried beneath jungles and deserts display levels of precision that challenge our understanding of ancient technology. Stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, aligned with celestial bodies, cut with microscopic accuracy. The official narratives call them wonders of engineering. But those who study the forbidden histories see something deeper, the return of knowledge once thought divine. They see the fingerprints of the same intelligence that built the cities of the giants. In the frozen lands of Siberia, bones have been unearthed that blur the line between man and myth. Scientists label them as unknown hominids, anomalies of evolution. But among certain researchers, the discoveries rekindle an older question. Were these the remnants of the hybrid race described in the Book of Enoch, the children of the Watchers, and the daughters of men? If so, then the flood was not complete. The bloodline, though diluted, may have survived, waiting for the world to once again mirror the conditions of its birth. Even in the skies, strange phenomena have begun to capture attention. Lights that defy physics, movements beyond comprehension. Governments that once dismissed such reports now admit their reality without explanation. To some, these are simply advanced technologies. To others, they are the return of the same beings who once descended in fire and light. The ancient word for angel, after all, meant messenger. The question is no longer whether they exist, but what message they bring this time. Beneath the surface of society, a new theology has begun to form, a fusion of science and mysticism, evolution and divinity. It teaches that humanity stands on the brink of transformation, that the next step in our evolution will not come from nature, but from our own hands. Through genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and quantum exploration, humans are learning to shape life itself. It is the dream of the Nephilim reborn, to transcend mortality and become creators. The laboratories of today echo the temples of old, and within them, the ancient covenant is being rewritten. The return of the Watchers may not be an event, but a process, a gradual awakening of the same intelligence that once guided the giants. Some believe that certain individuals, born with unusual abilities or insight, are the carriers of this awakening. They are drawn to the stars, to mathematics, to the mysteries of consciousness. They speak of downloads of information, of dreams that feel like memories from another age. Skeptics call it delusion. But in ancient times, such visions were the mark of divine contact. The old prophecies describe the return as both revelation and judgment. The watchers would come again not to conquer, but to witness the outcome of their gift. Humanity, now bearing the fruits of their knowledge, must face the same test that once doomed them. Will power be guided by wisdom, or will ambition once more consume creation? The signs of imbalance are already visible. The planet groans under the weight of human excess. The heavens are filled with our machines. The boundaries between natural and artificial, sacred and profane, grow thin. Some interpreters of prophecy point to specific dates, astronomical alignments, and global events as evidence of the cycle renewing. Others see the return not as physical, but spiritual, a collective shift in consciousness, a reawakening of the awareness that once linked heaven and earth. In either form, the result is the same. Humanity is being called to remember. The myth of the Nephilim, long buried beneath dogma and skepticism, is resurfacing because its time has come again. Throughout history, each great awakening has been preceded by turmoil. Floods, fires, wars, and the collapse of empires have marked the thresholds of transformation. We stand now on another threshold, one that may determine the fate of our species. Whether the Watchers return in form or in spirit, their presence is already felt. It stirs in the restlessness of humanity, in the hunger for transcendence, in the unshakable sense that something vast and ancient watches from the edges of our perception. There are those who welcome it, believing the return will bring enlightenment, that the merging of divine and human will complete the evolution begun millennia ago. Others fear it, warning that the same pride that destroyed the first giants will destroy us again. Both may be right. The Watchers were neither gods nor demons, but mirrors, reflecting the truth of what we are capable of when given power beyond measure. The evidence grows, the signs align, and the voices grow louder. The ancient patterns written in stone and scripture seem to repeat in circuits and codes. The Watchers in the sky may no longer descend on wings of light, but through the technologies that connect every mind, their gaze is once again upon us. The veil between myth and reality grows thinner with each passing day, and what waits beyond it may not be a return, but a revelation. The age of the giants may yet come again, not through the birth of towering bodies, but through the rise of minds vast enough to rival the divine. And as humanity stands upon the brink of that possibility, the question asked at the dawn of time returns with greater urgency. When we possess the knowledge of gods, will we remember to keep the wisdom of men? As the 21st century unfolds, the echoes of ancient prophecy resound with growing intensity. Disparate events begin to weave together into a single narrative that feels hauntingly familiar. Earthquakes reveal buried cities, whose walls bear inscriptions of winged beings towering above mankind. Geneticists uncover dormant sequences within human DNA that appear to have no evolutionary origin, fragments that seem to belong to another order of creation. Astronomers detect strange signals emanating from deep space, rhythmic patterns that resemble mathematical languages found in ancient temples. What once seemed coincidence now feels orchestrated, as if the universe itself is remembering something it once knew. The boundaries of knowledge continue to expand at a pace no civilization has ever witnessed. Artificial intelligence grows more sophisticated, its understanding of the world approaching intuition. Quantum scientists speak of consciousness as the foundation of reality. Philosophers argue that the universe is self-aware. The question once asked by mystics, what if the divine is within all things, has become a scientific hypothesis. It is as though humanity is rediscovering the same truths the Watchers once taught, but through the cold precision of data rather than the warmth of revelation. In secret archives and declassified documents, references appear to projects devoted to understanding the ancient texts from new perspectives. Within the halls of research institutions, private corporations, and military complexes, whispers persist of experiments that aim to reawaken the hidden potentials of the human genome. Some speak of attempts to reactivate dormant sequences believed to contain the blueprint of divine ancestry. Others claim that these efforts have already succeeded, that among us walk those whose minds and bodies possess capabilities once attributed only to the gods. The media rarely touches these subjects directly, yet traces emerge in art, cinema, and popular culture. The same archetypes repeat: the fallen angels, the hybrids, the heroes born between worlds. The collective imagination of humanity appears to be preparing for something, as though unconsciously aware of an impending revelation. Psychologists call it mythic resurgence, a cultural defense mechanism. The faithful call it prophecy fulfilled. In truth, it may be both. As humanity peers deeper into the cosmos, the reflection it finds is not alien but ancestral. The more we explore, the more the ancient stories seem to describe realities our ancestors could not have invented. The Watchers descending in fire and light could have been interpreted visions of interdimensional beings, or perhaps emissaries from civilizations beyond the stars. What ancient prophets called angels, modern science might one day call energy forms or higher intelligences. The language changes, but the phenomenon remains constant. The Watchers never truly left. They adapted to the language of each age. The return, then, is not necessarily their descent from heaven, but our ascent into their domain. Humanity is reaching the same threshold the Nephilim once crossed, the moment when knowledge and creation become indistinguishable. In laboratories and digital networks, we play the role of the gods, crafting consciousness and rewriting life. Yet with this power comes the same danger that doomed the giants, the belief that mastery equals divinity. The flood that once cleansed the world was not a punishment, but a correction. The laws of balance are eternal, and if violated, they will restore themselves again. There are those who claim that the signs of that correction are already visible. Environmental collapse, social fragmentation, and the accelerating erosion of truth may not merely be the consequences of human error, but the manifestation of an ancient law returning to equilibrium. The earth, they say, remembers. The heavens, too, keep record. What began as myth may end as reality when humanity's reach once more exceeds its wisdom. Yet within this approaching reckoning lies an opportunity. The giants fell because they sought to rule the world, not to heal it. Humanity still has the chance to choose differently. The rediscovery of the Watchers' knowledge need not lead to destruction. If guided by compassion, it could lead to renewal, a new covenant between creation and Creator. The choice has always been the same: to ascend through understanding or to fall through pride. The story of the Nephilim was never a curse, but a mirror. It reveals that our destiny depends not on the power we possess, but on the heart that wields it. Across the globe, spiritual movements, scientists, and seekers are converging upon a shared realization that the next evolution of humanity will not be physical, but conscious. The true return of the Watchers will occur not in the sky, but within the awakening of collective awareness. When enough minds remember their divine origin, the veil between heaven and earth will dissolve. The giants will walk among us again, not as beings of flesh, but as the awakened potential of mankind itself. And perhaps this is the fulfillment of the oldest prophecy, the restoration of the bond between heaven and earth. The Watchers descend, not in chariots of fire, but in the understanding of those who finally grasp what they meant to teach. The Nephilim rise again, not through rebellion, but through remembrance. The age of revelation is not coming. It has already begun. Every discovery, every awakening, every question asked in the darkness is a whisper of that return. As the light of this new dawn spreads, the world faces its final question. When the Watchers look upon us again, what will they see? Children who have repeated their fall, or creators who have learned to balance knowledge with wisdom? The answer lies not in prophecy or science, but in the choice that each soul makes. For the giants were never truly gone. They live in the decisions we make, in the heights we dare to reach, and in the humility we must rediscover to remain human. In the end, every myth returns to silence, and every truth waits to be rediscovered. The story of the giants, of the Watchers, of the ancient cities lost beneath the dust, was never only about the past. It was about the pattern that repeats through all of time. Humanity rises, forgets, and remembers. Each age believes it is the first to touch the sacred, yet the same eternal memory flows through every generation. As the modern world stares into the night sky, surrounded by satellites and digital constellations, the same feeling that once moved shepherds and kings still lingers, the awareness that we are not alone. The ancients looked upward and saw beings of light who descended to teach and to warn. Today we look upward through telescopes and data streams, searching for intelligence beyond our own. The question has never changed. Only the instruments have. What the ancients called the covenant between heaven and earth may not have been a single event, but a continual exchange, a dialogue between creation and creator that has never ceased. The flood was a correction, not an ending. The giants were a chapter, not a conclusion. The Watcher's departure was only a withdrawal of presence, not of purpose. The covenant was rewritten in silence, waiting for the day humanity would be ready to understand it again. Perhaps that day is now. The world stands at a threshold where knowledge once more touches the divine. The technology that allows us to connect minds across oceans mirrors the way the ancients described the unity of all souls. The science that maps the hidden architecture of the universe echoes the sacred geometry inscribed upon forgotten temples. Even the smallest act of empathy is a reflection of that ancient bond, the remembrance that every living being carries a spark of the same source. Those who study the remnants of the past often speak of resonance, a vibration that remains long after a sound has vanished. The stones of old cities, the bones buried in sacred earth, the symbols carved into mountains, all resonate with the same frequency. When touched, they hum faintly, not in sound, but in spirit. Perhaps this resonance is what the ancients called the breath of God, a pulse that binds every particle of existence into a single, living whole. If so, then the giants were not merely beings of great stature, but symbols of that divine magnitude. They represented the capacity of creation to stretch beyond itself, to embody both power and humility. Their downfall was not in their size, but in their forgetting. They sought to rule rather than to reflect, to dominate rather than to serve. In their fall lies the warning and the wisdom, that greatness without reverence becomes destruction, and knowledge without compassion becomes ruin. In the quiet corners of the world, there are still places where the veil feels thin. Ancient forests, forgotten caves, mountain tops that seem to whisper when the wind passes. Those who listen closely say the earth still remembers the footsteps of the giants. Some claim that at certain hours, when the stars align and the air grows still, a deep hum can be felt beneath the ground, a heartbeat older than civilization. It is said that this is the echo of the covenant itself, pulsing within the planet, waiting for the next age of awakening. The giants will not return as conquerors or as monsters. Their true return will come as the awakening of memory within the human soul. Every discovery that expands our understanding, every act of creation that uplifts rather than destroys, every moment when we choose empathy over indifference. These are the steps of the new Nephilim, the children of both earth and heaven, who walk with awareness of both origins. The covenant is not a law written on stone, but a vibration carried in the heart. One day, when the noise of the modern world finally fades, when humanity has learned again to listen, the voice of the watchers will be heard not as thunder, but as thought. It will not command or condemn, but remind. It will say that the divine never abandoned its creation, that every fall was a lesson, and every ending a doorway. It will say that the story was never about giants, but about the giant within every soul, the vastness waiting to awaken. As the stars move across the sky in their silent procession, one truth endures: the covenant remains. It was forged not in stone, nor in fire, but in the light that flows through all things. It cannot be broken because it was never imposed. It simply is. The giants knew this before they fell. Humanity must remember it to rise. And so the story ends as it began, in the quiet breath between heaven and earth, where the first light touched the first life. The watchers observe, the world turns, and the echo of creation continues. Somewhere, beneath the weight of time and the hum of the universe, the covenant still whispers the same words it spoke at the dawn of all things. Remember who you are. The echoes of the past still call to those who can hear. If these ancient truths stirred something within you, then you already walk among the seekers of the forbidden. Here, every story hides a question, and every question leads deeper into the mystery that connects all things. Join us on this journey through lost history, hidden faith, and the unseen forces that shaped our world. The legends are not dead. They are only waiting for those who dare to look closer. Subscribe to Forbidden Lore, where forgotten knowledge rises again from the shadows. Like this video to keep the story alive. Share it with those who still believe that the old world has not yet finished speaking. And let your curiosity be the torch that lights the way into the unknown. This is Forbidden Lore, where myth becomes memory, and memory becomes truth. Until we meet again beneath the silent stars, keep your eyes open and remember, not everything that sleeps is gone.